Chapter 25. The Mine. It is worth reflecting just how prosperous Blackstone had become. The town was growing faster than ever before. Many Keats were leaving the wilds to join in the prosperity, and even the occasional Canary prospector or trader arrived from the hegemony. The town burst its old boundaries, consuming the nearby woodlands to spawn more houses down the valley. Progress was devouring the land. My opinion aside, life was good for the Blackstoners. They had bellies full of food and hearts full of hope. More good news came from Trubios' trade with the Fraka. One of Verig's vassal tribes had been defeated, and the Horkon's efforts to unify the orcs faltered. I've never believed wealth to be a measure of success, yet to a Durian, Blackstone was at its height. Then, it all went wrong. Jorwin Weaver, The Keatish Cycle. Elayna could indulge in this dream. It was beautiful. For once, she embraced the night's fancy with pleasure. It was a simple scene of tenderness between friends, maybe lovers. His scent alone was arousing. He did not have the acerbic tang of a man, but a tantalizing spring forest fragrance that thrilled her senses. She held his sky-blue eyes captive as he held hers. She was tending a healing wound, but was admiring his physique. Then the dream changed. There was an explosion. The latch shattered. Her door swung inwards, and her companion was abruptly gone, leaving a charred shadow on the wooden boards. Hot, smoky air blew in through the door, and the ground trembled beneath her. "No!" she gasped as she saw Blackstone silhouetted by flame and shaking violently. Walls tumbled, roofs collapsed. Then she felt the breath of someone on her neck. "First the father, now the daughter," he whispered in a Durian accent. He stabbed her once. Her breath exploded from her lungs and left her gasping. He stabbed her twice, deep in her liver. He stabbed her thrice, and there was an explosion in her chest. It did not echo away, but instead grew louder and louder until the roof fell in. The dream shredded. "Oh!" Elayna sat up in bed, shaking. She clasped where she had been stabbed while reaching for the first happier dream. "Kerne?" She breathed the question, daring to hope she'd caught the lost remembrance of their last night together. But what did that terrible premonition mean? Was the assassin planning to act against her? She felt Kerne's loss sharper than ever before. Why did a dead man have such a hold on her? She heard a yelling outside and levered her heavily pregnant body off the bed. She opened a shutter looking out over the market round. "What is it?" she shouted. Miekrig answered from a gathering crowd. "An explosion up the valley. Dugain thinks it's from the cemetery." An explosion? Splashes of orange and red lit the cliff faces by the cemetery under a pall of smoke. "Master Hunter, take 2 men and investigate. Make sure Gallon is unharmed." Miekrig bristled at the order but did not argue. He picked out 2 of the militia and headed for the ford. She watched him go, then looked around, realizing Leusios had not returned. Leusios's head hit the floor of the chapel. "Ouch!" Dregs of panic from being trapped in his paralyzed body set his heart racing and made him gasp for breath. He struggled, tangling the shroud in his limbs as he fought to throw it off. His muscles, held locked for so long, went into spasms. He cried out in pain as a dozen violent cramps racked his body. "Lie still," Horth ordered him. "Let your muscles recover." Only when he calmed his juddering limbs could he cautiously raise his head. The light filtering through the archway was orange and smoky, still unstable. He tried to stand and staggered when the shroud became snarled between his feet. He caught himself on the stone bier and hung onto it, muscles trembling. Deepening his breath, he soothed his body back to normality. The moment he had enough breath, he yelled to exorcise the horror of his helplessness. "I won't tell anyone if you won't." Horth glowed with wry amusement. Leusios ignored the raven. The townsfolk must have heard the explosion and would see the glow of the flames. His words came out raw and scratchy.
"Have to get away before someone investigates."
He coughed and massaged his bruised throat where the dead sallow had grabbed him.
"Anyone on the path?"
Horth took to the air to look.
"Yes, Meekrig and 2 militia folk from the town."
Still feeling stiff, Leusios hobbled out of the chapel, crossed the path, and staggered into the rough grasses near the Ruthial. Then he squatted down amongst the bulrushes and watched Meekrig and his militia approach in a haze of torchlight and smoke. Shivering in the darkness, he considered his options: ride to his cabin to consult the Maja and her books, or did he dare visit Elayna, the Watcher? The man still came and went, wrapped in a cloak of mystery. How could Galen, a necromagus, operate under the nose of the Watcher? Curiosity outbid caution. He would visit the Magus. Meekrig and his companion left the path and ran up to the blazing cottage, shouting for Galen. While they were preoccupied by the blaze, Leusios slipped back to Blackstone. He avoided the crowd gathering in the market round and arrived at Elayna's stone house unseen. He hammered on the door. Silence. Leusios ground the toe of his boot into the dirt of the street, nervously wondering whether he wanted the door to be answered after all. Then it opened to reveal the black-hooded magus.
"Master Leusios?"
rumbled the big man.
"Master Elayna, I need to speak with you."
He had been dismissed from this door, armed with more guile than that simple line. Feeling suddenly foolish, he braced himself for the traditional refusal. Elayna's dark eyes studied him, and then shifted to the distant cliffs aglow with the fire in the cemetery.
"Very well."
Leusios had begun to turn away, and stopped to check if Elayna's permission was genuine. But the magus had already moved back inside.
"Close the door after you."
He followed with breathless excitement. He had to pass through a second door to enter the reception room beyond. It was comfortable, with oak beams and a fireplace well stocked with wood. Elayna knelt by the hearth and placed fresh logs on the dying embers.
"Flowers!"
he commanded, and it crackled into life. Turning in a swirl of his heavy black robe, the magus swept an arm out to indicate a padded chair.
"You look cold. Wait here."
He left through a small door to another part of the house. Leusios sank into the chair gratefully and looked around. There was a cedar panel hung on the wall inset with a triangle of rosewood, the symbol of Inaxos, the spirit of order. More intriguing was a beautifully carved wooden staircase ascending to the floor above. That had to be where Elayna's arcane library was, because all the neatly arranged books and scrolls Leusios could see in this room were very mundane. Perhaps a laboratory and summoning circle too.
"Drink this,"
rumbled Elayna. Leusios gave a little start. The man had departed, heated a goblet of spiced wine, and returned, all within the rustle of his robe. Such a domestic act from a magus felt out of place.
"Thank you,"
Leusios said. Elayna settled himself into the chair next to the fire and watched him drink his wine. The sip of the warm, spiced wine reminded his body how cold he had become during the paralysis, and he started shivering uncontrollably. Elayna waited patiently until the warmth of the fire and the wine restored Leusios. He opened his mouth and met those dark, penetrating eyes. The words stuck in his throat. What if Elayna knew about the necromagus and was an accomplice? Other concerns flocked to him. The heavy oak doors, the thick drapes over the window. Nobody got invited into this room. Nobody. The cozy sitting room suddenly felt more like a trap already shut upon him. He glanced at the goblet, suddenly heavy in his hand, weighed down by the suspicion of poison.
"You look nervous, Leusios,"
said Elayna in his deep, rich bass.
"Perhaps I can help you get started. There was an explosion earlier. Galan Brothagan is dead. What can you tell me about this?"
Scorch it. Leusios threw caution and paranoia aside to gamble instead. He told Elayna everything from the discovery of Sallow's body to the explosion. He excluded Horth and had to be creative about discovering Lakeland's involvement. Fortunately, a dead man makes a good liar.
Gallen bragged to me as I lay helpless that he was making a fortune selling the bodies to the overseer of Gavaine's new mine.
Culain nodded, dwelling on that information.
How do you suppose the explosion occurred?
Salo was carrying Muvradunum fire gems. Vibnia took them, but I think Gallen found one. He must have broken it accidentally. Culain ran a finger around the rim of his goblet as he dwelled upon all he had heard.
His death released you?
Leusios relaxed. Culain's concern appeared genuine.
So, you are telling me that a necromagus was amongst us? That failure is on me. Have you any other evidence of servants of Morsos in Blackstone?
Morsos? Lucius's mind flitted to Kasutra's blank book, the Gratuitus Invenum Morsum. He dared not mention that. What has that to do with Morsos?
Summoning evil spirits to possess the bodies of the dead. Everything.
Culain rumbled ominously.
Such demonic creatures are damned, bound in the realm of Charkodai for all eternity. Only a servant of Morsos would risk calling them forth. And why sell them to the overseer?
Leusios held his breath, seeing that the big man was thinking out loud. Culain breathed out a deep, rumbling sigh, and then pronounced firmly,
No. A small bag of coin for each body is no fortune. And what does he spend it on? No. The money is meaningless. But you already suspected that, didn't you, Leusios?
He nodded. But I can't even guess at Gallen's true purpose. Culain drummed his fingers on the rim of his goblet.
Why did a necromagus of considerable power come to Blackstone and invest his efforts so? The answer is in Lackland's mine. The dead do not gossip, so whatever secrets are there remain safe.
How dangerous are they? Leusios asked. These walking dead?
Oh, they are waifling demons, Culain sniffed. The weakest of their kind. They draw strength from corruption and vulnerable minds. Thus they abhor the power of absolutes, such as faith and duty.
Kerne was dead. Leusios sighed inwards. He would have been useful for this task. Then another name came to mind that made him nod slowly.
I think I know a woman who can help me. Will you join us?
Culain smiled without humor.
From what you have told me, there are other matters that now demand my attention.
He forestalled Lucius's question by raising his voice brusquely.
No, I will not tell you what these matters are. Investigate the mine, and tell me what you find.
Lucius's frustration surfaced in a flash of anger.
You tell me nothing, and expect me to share everything? Did you even suspect Gallen was a necromagus?
Culain became stern.
Gallen was a priest of Taganus. That I know to be true. So, the correct question is how and when did he become a necromagus? That is a mystery to me. Yes, he hid it in plain sight in a perfect disguise. I am embarrassed to have missed him, and grateful for your information. I promise to make my own inquiries and tell you everything that is relevant.
The big man rose from his chair and moved towards the front door. Leusios followed him to the door. Culain's hand paused on the latch.
If I may beg one last question.
What?
Did Gallen mention the Blackstone?
Not tonight. I do remember him telling a dozen tales about what's under it. Everything from treasure to Murka himself.
Then you had better be careful, Master Miller. Of all Gauvain's mines, Lakeland's shaft sinks closest to the Blackstone.
You don't think they're digging underneath? He trailed off, realizing that was exactly the thought behind those dark eyes. Leusios left, his mind churning. Demons, the magus had said. He hurried down towards the small church and rapped on Vibnia's door. The priest appeared wearing a woolen nightshirt with the same gravitas as her ceremonial robes. Vibnia folded her arms as she listened to Leusios rush out the story.
So let's you and me go up to that mine now,
he concluded.
No,
she said adamantly.
Not until the morning.
But we have to act before the evidence is hidden,
Leusios argued.
Why?
Vibnia made a dismissive gesture with an elegant twist of her wrist.
Gallen is dead, and Lakeland has no idea. Based on what Mikrig told me, I have declared the matter with Gallen a tragic accident.
Well, it was,
Leusios said cautiously. Having massaged the truth for Culain, Leusios had delivered the story much more smoothly this time, avoiding Horth again. The priest was unimpressed.
The fact that poor Gallen seems to have run across the graveyard backwards while being incinerated to a crisp is a little inconsistent with a tragic domestic accident. But, so far, that has been overlooked by everyone. So, for now, I cannot offer a better, mundane explanation.
I see. Better to not confuse the townsfolk,
Leusios agreed warily. He wasn't used to the priest being so oblique.
Now, let's try your explanation. An accident with a fire gem, you say?
Vibnia's manner steamed with scorn.
You need to do better than that, Leusios. It is much more likely you used it on him, or simply blasted him with lightning.
Before he could retort, Vibnia raised a long finger of caution.
I will assist you, but first, tell me the truth.
He needed the priest's help, and this was getting him nowhere. But he felt an irrational need to protect Horth.
I can't explain it. Somehow his magical grip on me failed. I was terrified to face him alone, so, yes, I ambushed and killed him.
Vibnia accepted his new lie with a slow nod.
Then let us hope for the sake of your soul that he was the evil necromagus you claim him to be.
Lakeland yawned as he approached his mine. He had taken Gallen's proposal to Gauvain under the guise of it being his idea. The merchant had smelled a rat. It took one to know one. But Gauvain had not asked him any questions.
"Deliver the gold, and you can have your cut,"
was all the merchant had said in a snide manner, not believing it possible. He'd wiped the sneer off that weasel's face when the first cartload of gold was ready for collection.
"I don't know, and I don't want to know how you did it,"
Gauvain had said with a greedy grin.
"But keep this up, and I'll make you a rich man."
Riches. Lakeland had been a petty thug breaking bones for pennies. Now a life of plenty would be his. He yawned and hummed happily to himself as he dismounted the cart. Several of the dead workers were hauling this week's gold out of the mine. Come daylight, Gauvain's carter would collect the load in blissful ignorance of who, or what, had dug it out.
32. Get off the cart and join that group,
he told Sallow's corpse. The dead men climbed down and approached him. Lakeland frowned.
"I said join that group,"
he snarled, pointing at the other undead. A blue-green light glinted in the dead eyes.
"I'm sorry,"
said Sallow in a rich, cultured voice, and smiled.
"There's been an unexpected change of plan."
Lakeland reached for his knife, only to find an empty sheath. Then he realized that his blade was in the dead man's hand.
No, please, wait!"
Leusios crept into his bedroom and heard Elayna stir in the next room.
"You're back late,"
she murmured. He didn't want a conversation, not now.
Go back to sleep. You need all your strength.
The baby has other ideas.
Is cooking?
A wrestling match more like. And he might be a she,
Elayna insisted. She yawned and rolled onto her back to study him. Leusios was mesmerized. He sat on her bedside and watched the shape within her womb shifting. The reality of imminent fatherhood changed so much. Tomorrow he would have to face mystery and even danger in Gavaine's mind. That meant leaving not just Elayna, but a child behind. A new disturbing emotion crept through him. Not fear for himself, but fear for others. It was strange and disconcerting.
If you're prudent, there's enough money to care for you and the child.
She looked at him with those wonderful brown eyes and cocked her head.
Where did that come from? What are you up to?
He looked up at the ceiling to avoid her gaze.
Do you know what happened in the cemetery?
Yes, she said. First a stranger, and now Gawain is dead. It can't be a coincidence.
I know. I'm investigating tomorrow. I'll explain everything when I get back.
He hoped that wasn't a rash promise. She pushed herself up with one hand and reached out to stroke his neck with the other.
You're hurt. Don't hide things from me.
He paused.
Yes, I promised, he admitted. But I don't understand what's happening. But tomorrow, Vibnia and I will investigate Gavaine's newest mine.
She sank back into the mattress with a tired sigh.
I told you he was up to no good, she grumbled. What have you found out?
He could have said, "Oh, he employs dead people," but it was a crazy thing to say out loud.
I can't say, not yet.
I want you back safe.
Fear entered her eyes.
Leusios, I have such terrible dreams. Fire, devastation.
He took her hand.
What happened?
I'm not sure. It felt the world got turned on its head and shaken to its foundations. Everything went wrong.
Just nightmares. I'm sure you got good dreams too.
He grinned, trying to make light of it. She looked away, but not fast enough for him to see her cheeks flush. The awkward silence drew out. He endured it with a smile, unsure what to say. Finally, she spoke again.
By all that's blessed by the divine, be careful. I don't want to lose you too.
Elayna pondered Vibnia's note. The priest's precise script explained she had left on an urgent matter with Leusios, and re-emphasized that she must not take any action until the priest returned. Scorch it. What if the assassin suspected her? What if he intended to act today, before Vibnia returned? Leanne answered a knock at the kitchen door.
Taeneas, please come in,
said the housekeeper. Elayna froze where she stood in the main room. Why had the soldier come to the side door?
Thank you. I'm here to see Mistress Farmer,
the noble replied nervously. Could she slip out in time? Elayna's eyes flew to the front door.
She's in the main room. I'll bring some wine,
Leanne offered. Elayna was barely halfway across the room when Taeneas entered.
Elayna,
Taeneas started with a tense smile.
I'm sorry to disturb you.
He was in armor, bearing both sword and knife.
It's not a good time, Taeneas. I need to see Mistress Murgathwin, she lied.
He darted across the room to intercept her.
Wait, please.
Elayna stifled a gasp. Taeneas was young and strong, and she was weighed down with her pregnant belly. Her eyes flitted to her father's sword. Leusios had insisted on hanging it in pride of place above the hearth.
How can I help?
She asked as calmly as possible, while edging towards where it hung.
You are one of Anya's best friends.
He started. His hand gripped the pommel of his sword. A nervous habit, or an intention to act. Leanne came in with 2 beakers of wine.
Why don't you sit, Lord Ambronius?
Elayna suggested politely. He laughed.
Just Taeneas. I don't take my brother's title.
He shrugged.
Not yet, anyway. Over by the fire.
Elayna directed the housekeeper, who beamed, and put the 2 beakers on a table by the fireplace. She gestured for Taeneas to sit in one of Leusios's expensive chairs. The Thaliani captain took the cue and sat, but anxiously on the edge, ready to spring up. Elayna was so busy trying to read the man that she missed Leanne leaving them alone.
Elayna,
Taeneas began uncertainly.
you are a good friend of Anya's, and I need your advice.
Elayna blinked.
Advice? About what? It's her birthday soon, and I'm wondering what to give her.
She stared back at the man, conscious of Leanne clattering in the kitchen next door. Was this for real? Or was he unwilling to act with a witness so close? Or maybe he was just playing with her. Well, she could do that too. She was still standing, and her father's sword was in reach. She drew strength from it.
Mind if I sharpen this while we speak?
It was Taeneas' turn to blink in surprise, and then he gave a shrug and an awkward laugh.
Of course not.
She unsheathed the sword, lay it across her lap, and slipped the whetstone out of its pouch on the scabbard.
Anya loves a blend of the practical and beautiful. Have you considered one of those dresses from Corvulum?
Leusios and Vibnia found 2 carts abandoned outside Lakeland's mine. One was empty with oxen still attached, and the other was a handcart loaded with gold.
No one's here,
the priest concluded.
How curious.
Look!
Leusios pointed to the spatter of pooling of congealed blood.
We should go in,
the priest decided, and lit a torch with her flint and steel. Leusios pointed at the rock as they followed the steep incline of the shaft.
The gold seam must have run between these 2 different rocks, Leusios explained.
Gold is not normally found that way,
Vibnia pointed out.
It is here in Blackstone, Leusios said. It presses through natural faults.
I know. That is my point,
the priest insisted.
The seams are not natural. It is as if it is growing through the points of least resistance in the rock from an unknown source beneath us.
Vibnia raised a hand in caution as the sound of picks and shovels grew louder.
We are close. Whoever is digging in the dark.
She pulled out a flask for a sip and then nodded for him to lead on. The passage widened into a large chamber of cracked walls and rubble. The far end opened out further, making a gallery that revealed a dramatic change in the rock. The far wall was so black that it was like looking out into a starless night. Unmarked by pick and undimmed by time, it was the face of the Blackstone itself. The gallery followed the surface of the Blackstone to the left. There the darkness rang with picks and the scrape of shovels. Vibnia's torch was not bright enough to see who was digging. As they descended a slope of broken stone, their light spilled onto a sight that froze Leusios in his tracks. Although he'd already guessed the truth, it still revolted him. Rotting and mindless, the dead had been made into slaves for the overseer. Their skeletal arms hacked at the gold seams, reliant on Galen's puppeteered demons rather than their own rancid muscles. It was the first time Leusios had ever seen Vibnia moved to horror and disgust. Then he saw the priest's jaw set with purpose.
So, demons have crossed over, and we must drive them back, she muttered.
Vibnia!
He loaded the priest's name with caution, but was ignored. One long, thin hand was already pulling out the circle symbol of the corpus flagellos from inside her cloak. Before Leusios could grab her, Vibnia strode towards the slaving dead and held forth the circle gripped in her fingertips. Her voice was both sonorous and ominous.
Unearthly minions! You soil the bodies of our beloved kin and neighbors!
The sound of the tool stopped. Some of the wretched bodies turned to stare at them with sockets that were either empty or running with rot.
Know that I am Vibnia Aquitus of the Avanti and of the Corpus Flagellos. I abjure you. Leave these shells of our worthy dead. Leave them in peace.
More of the dead turned around to face the challenge, hefting their picks like axes. They opened their rotting mouths in defiance. Their attention magnified Vibnia's righteous fury. She raised the symbol higher and pointed her flaming torch like a commanding scepter. "Flee back to the forsaken place you were called from. For I wield not the coarse corruption of magic, but the pure faith that binds humanity to the divine." More and more undead shuffled out of the darkness, skeletal jaws stretching wide with murderous intent.
"Vibnia!"
Leusios muttered anxiously. Those with enough flesh for throats and lungs hissed in anger. Then from amidst them came Lakeland the Overseer. His eyes were dead and glassy, and his chest stained crimson around a rent over his heart. He carried a bloody knife. His voice was still intelligible.
"Kill them!"
The dead advanced.
"There's too many!"
Leusios reached inside his leather coat for a vial of essence. As he did so, he glanced to the roof and cursed. It was riddled with cracks. One lightning bolt might collapse the entire cavern. Undeterred, Vibnia took 2 steps forward and bellowed,
"One lone voice called you here, whereas I speak for the million souls who abhor the filth of Morsos. In one chorus with the Evermighty, we say, go!"
The last syllable slammed into their pathetic bodies, sending them reeling. Leusios felt reality shiver.
"Iuri malum!"
Vibnia shouted. Faith coalesced around the priest like the breaking of a new day. Shafts of pure light streaked through the cavern. 2 skeletons were struck and shattered into dust. She pressed forwards, the light intensifying as bright as the noonday sun. The remaining demons shrieked and fled. Lakeland screamed and staggered as, all around him, the corpses collapsed into piles of putrefying flesh and bone. The dead Overseer lunged, gashing the priest's arm. Leusios drew his own knife and charged, stabbing the corpse in its side. Lakeland ignored him, seizing Vibnia by the throat.
"Master said, kill the priest,"
he rasped as he raised his knife. Vibnia grimaced as she tried to pry his grip free, but did not have the strength. Leusios tried to pull him off, but Lakeland smashed the cold, dead knuckles of his knife hand into Leusios's jaw and sent him reeling backwards. In that moment of distraction, Vibnia drew her long knife and thrust it through Lakeland's eye. His grip on her throat loosened.
"Abjuro te spiritus immunde!"
she gasped out. Radiance exploded from the blade and eye socket. The dead man's skull fractured, spilling light and brain fluid. The body collapsed. Leusios stared in disbelief as Vibnia calmly wiped her blade. Culain's advice had been more meaningful than he had expected.
"How did you do that?"
"Your faith is weak,"
Vibnia observed coolly as she knelt to stop a skull that was rolling past. She spoke a soft benediction over it and then stood up to gaze mournfully over the scattered remains.
"Demons, weak ones. Their grip on this reality was tenuous. All one needs is faith, Leusios."
He felt his cheeks burn. There was no divine plan for him, and yet he stared at the broken corpses.
"My thanks that your faith is so much greater than mine," he admitted.
If faith had this kind of power, had he made the right choices?
"So, they're back in this Charkadai?"
"Yes. These are the kind of secrets that magi seek. That is how they risk their souls."
She swept her hands across the putrefied remains.
"Do you really want this kind of power, Leusios?"
"No."
That answer, at least, was honest. Vibnia nodded in satisfaction.
"That is the beginning."
She sighed and considered the dead a while longer. Then she made her way from corpse to corpse, waving her torch this way and that to find and bless each skull. When she was done, she crossed back to Leusios.
"Most were Durians. Galen could hide the theft of bodies due to be cremated. But 2 I expected are missing. Salo, the murder victim, and Gerontos."
At least his father or stepmother were not amongst those wretches, thought Leusios. He would have recognized them by their charred bones.
"So, what shall we do with the bodies?"
She sighed and shook her head.
Nothing for now. We must investigate what they revealed.
Revealed?
Leusios followed her gesture and gasped. There was a circular hole bored directly into the Blackstone.
An entrance? He wondered. No undead slave could cut such a perfect hole.
Vibnia joined him by the opening and peered in.
It angles down, but I cannot see the end.
Leusios stepped back and raised the torch towards the roof.
I've been wondering about the damage to the rock all around. It's as if there was a quake here.
Or an impact, Vibnia suggested. These patterns in the ceiling are unusual, as if the rock has been shattered and then fused by a great heat emanating from the Blackstone.
Leusios shrugged.
One legend says it fell from the sky, hurled by the divine to bury Morka.
The priest frowned.
The divine does not act so directly upon the world. We are his instruments, and it is our responsibility to act. As for the evil one, let us hope we do not find him down there.
The priest ran a hand around the hole.
It's warm.
Leusios touched the smooth surface. More than warmth, he felt a tingle of power.
Its recent magic made this hole. Someone entered here only hours ago.
Leusios had lived in the shadow of the Blackstone all his life. The legends speculated about everything from treasure to terror. Now, here was a way in. It was irresistible. He found a rope and tied it to a timber long enough to lodge across the shaft, and then looped the other end around his waist.
I'll go first,
he offered. Vibnia pursed her thin lips as she considered the offer.
Thank you. I'll stay back until you call me. Or scream.
Leusios was taken aback, not knowing how to respond. Vibnia gave him a ghost of a smile.
That was a joke. Take care.
Oh! He flashed a grin to cover his anxiety. Vibnia put a thin but firm hand on his.
And thank you.
Why?
Because you asked me to come with you. You think yourself a man of little faith, but you had faith in me.
Vibnia had used similar words to Kerne when they had prepared to face the mage hound.
Thank you, Vibnia,
he said, suddenly feeling profound apprehension. He drew in a deep breath and eased himself into the tunnel and into the Blackstone. That's the end of Chapter 25. Next time we cross back to the far south. Duria is triumphant, and Kerne, ignorant of the danger he's in, seeks the Magister's help. Chris would like everyone to know that the digital and hardcover version of Skyfire will be ready for when we finish this book. He'll confirm everything at christomkins.co.uk. Thanks for listening. If Blackstone is sparking your imagination, help us reach even more listeners by sharing or leaving your thoughts. See you in the next chapter.